Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Dad to Dads podcast. And today I have a familiar face on. A lady who almost broke the internet. She became a viral sensation and is by far my most downloaded episode. Welcome back to the show, Erin Schaden. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if I deserve all of that, but
You
yeah,
earned it.
I earned it. I'm not sure it was earned. I think it was just bestowed upon me. The infamy, right?
There you
But
go.
yes, thank you so much for having me, Robert. It's always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
well, look, before we go into the past episode a little bit, I would give quick background on you. 28 years in family law practice, correct?
Yep.
Still a practicing attorney.
Yep.
You also are a divorce coach
Yep.
as well as a mediator.
That's correct.
Anything I missed?
Nope. That's about it. That's
Living in sunny California, right?
yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful.
That's great.
Although
That's
we are
great.
getting way too much rain.
Well, here we're dealing with the pollen, so my apologies for my voice. But
Yeah.
so, Aaron, look at this. I have questions that I want to ask you, and
Okay.
these have all come from comments
Okay.
from two of our posts. One of our posts, Men versus Women in Divorce, that we put up towards the end of last year, collectively, we have 2.7 million views, and I alone have had 25,000 comments. It's crazy.
It is
Another
crazy.
one, number one thing that happens or I'm sorry, the number one thing that harms children in divorce, 500,000 views. And that's just from
Yeah.
mine alone. I don't know what you had. I mean, it's
A
crazy,
lot.
but you obviously said some things that a lot of people could relate to. And you
Yeah.
also upset quite a few too.
Yes, I did. I'm a great disruptor. I've been doing that since birth, right? Pissing people off. Yeah, that's crazy.
But,
Um,
I just kind of went through and I was reading, I didn't read all the comments. My goodness.
Good. You need to have a life.
I know. But I went through, as I was scrolling through some of the ones that kept coming up, and I thought this would be great to have Aaron back on to talk about these. And one of the things that I heard, it seems like time and time again, is custody being used as a weapon to
Mhm.
hurt the other parent.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
see that? How prevalent is that? Because it seems like, and let me say this, it seems from the guys, and these were all men, that they felt that was something that was real prevalent and common.
It probably, I mean, I think it is. I think that I don't, there are the people that definitely do it intentionally. I think a lot of times it ends up as a default position. I was talking with one of my clients this morning and, he was in, just a very complicated case, but it basically, through some fault of his and through some fault of the other sides and through some just like random happenstance life circumstances, the kids are alienated and aligned with mom. And um, that's it just kind of ended up that way. I think that if you're in litigation, right, if you're successful in keeping it out of court, right, I've kind of started retooling my practice. Like I talk to people now and I'm like, all right, it's a retainer for litigation that's this, a retainer for negotiation that's this, and it's a retainer for consultation for this. And I try to steer everybody to the middle path, right? That there's less risk. We're not, creating all the court deadlines that you have to adhere to and, all the fictitious, or not so fictitious pressure. And so, and then if we end up in a litigation manner, but I think that there's so many friction points and flex points and pain points with custody. And there's so many different perspectives that it ends up being an inadvertent at times tool, and everybody's trying to gain ground, right? And I think in states, especially like more on the East Coast where the 50-50, isn't kind of the gold standard, there's just so much more to fight about. I mean, people are like, well, no, I don't want you to have 50-50 custody, or how do I keep that away from him? And what do I have to allege? And what do I have to allege against her? And threatening each other with it. And then oftentimes, it's the elephant in the room. Like they're arguing about custody, but it's really like in Maryland, if you're if you're the non-custodial parent, you got to have 92 more overnights in order to get on the shared custody child support guidelines, right? So once you get over that, then your money goes way down. So a lot of times, women are saying to me, like, he doesn't really want the custody. Look at what things have been done. But now that we're in court, now he's just saying that he wants more custody. And as soon as he gets more custody and gets the reduction in child support, I'm going to end up with the kids all the time, and I'm not going to be getting any money, which happens, right? And then there's also those times that the guys are like, no, I just want to be an equal parent, right? And the reduction in child support is only fair if I'm raising my kids half the time. Even though I make more money than you, why should I be paying more for you, right? Like,
Right.
that's not fair.
So what's the answer? Because it's case by case. The court can't handle that.
No.
I mean, the attorneys can't handle that. The third parties, the guardian ad litems. I mean, honestly, I don't think a lot of them get the training to be able to,
No.
the custody evaluators. No.
Well, the custody evaluation process, I mean, to me, I know I'm going to probably piss more people off with this, but I just kind of think it's a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, not that the job that they're doing is not important, but it's the way that it's when it's ordered, it's way too late. The problems have been persistent and have really messed up the case by the time a custody evaluator gets in. I don't know exactly the way to fix that, right? Because the court isn't, we don't want the court ordering custody evaluations every single time somebody walks in and says they have a custody issue. But by the time it gets around to it and the person actually gets going, I mean, like right now, I have a case which we settled custody, but we had a custody evaluation ordered and we still haven't done anything. And that was 3 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So it hasn't even started yet. So what are these people been, assuming I wasn't able to negotiate an interim agreement, like what would they have been doing in this time? When mom's like, dad's insane, dad's crazy, dad's dangerous, and dad's like, no, I'm not, and I'm dealing with all my stuff. Yeah, I got some stuff, but I'm dealing with it. Like, if we hadn't been able to work an agreement, what's happening with those kids in the interim? Are they seeing dad? How often are they seeing dad? And mom is controlling all of it, right? So I don't know what the answer is. The answer is that the custody evaluations are, in my opinion, entered or ordered too late in the process to effectuate any meaningful change. I think too much deference is given to the status quo, especially in cases where the case is kind of languished. And so it's just kind of become this de facto, right? Like, you go in with a domestic violence order, the court gives temporary orders, and then that becomes the status quo. Well, what if, 2 months later you have a trial on domestic violence issues and it's all thrown out and the restraining order isn't granted?
Right.
Well, then
Right.
they got custody and now it's de facto, but it was all BS. Like, so that's not right. And and if you go in, then it goes to the best interest of the child. Well, it's the kid. This is what the kids are now used to. Yeah, but the kids are now used to a fictitious schedule that was based on not lies.
Right. Right.
So like now you've given this person and you rewarded them. Right. So what are they going to tell their friends to do? Well, here's what you do. You just say he shoved you at a custody exchange, and then you get a temporary order, and then you can negotiate, and then that becomes the status quo, and you win custody without ever seeing a courtroom, right? Except other than to get the protective order. So I don't know what you do about it.
And who suffers during all of this? The children.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody suffers to some degree. The kids.
I mean, it's no wonder there's so many people upset by our, last posts. I mean, there's no wonder.
Absolutely. I mean, men get screwed, women get screwed. Like everybody, the families are decimated in the process.
My question about being used as a weapon, and part of the reason why I asked this too was I was talking to somebody the other day, and a divorce was sprung on her. Like she had no idea. And her comment to me was, oh, he'll be lucky if he sees his children. Just you wait. He said good. Now, he's a pretty good dad, but she was using custody, using those children as a weapon, basically, wanting to make him pay.
Yeah.
And we had a discussion about that. And, of course, I had to, they need their dad. Dads are very important. You've got 2 daughters and you've got a son and giving the benefits. And she's just stewing. Nope, he's not going to see him. I'm going to do everything I can to limit the amount of time. And I'm like, hers wasn't driven by financial. It was just driven by spite,
Right. Yeah.
by just anger.
Well, the thing is like, I don't think that people in today's world.
And that's how she hired her attorney too. So sorry.
Oh, absolutely. She went after the biggest, baddest, most conflict laden possible, pit bull or whatever they're calling us these days. It's sad. But, to me, like, that's endemic of the society at large because, okay, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. It's an eye for an eye mentality, right? Like, okay, I'm going to get you before you can get me. And if you get me before I get you, I'm going to make you pay. And it's like, do you realize that the currency with which you're spending is your children and their
Yep.
emotional and physical well-being? Like, do you realize that? I mean, and I think it's just kind of like this great pervasive immaturity of human beings, right? Like, I don't know, this idea that somehow moms are more valuable than dads. The truth of the matter is, for whatever reason, we're still both required, right? We have
Right.
not been able to, women have not been able to reproduce all by ourselves. We need you guys, right? And it turns out that you're more important than the sperm that you donate, right? Like that the
Right.
kids' fundamental development is that they need, two, they benefit from two loving parents. It doesn't matter if there's two women or two men or whatever, like whatever the family dynamic composition of whatever spectrum of gender we're dealing with at this point in time, children benefit from two, right? Because then one person doesn't have to be the heavy all the time. You're a single
Right.
dad, like it sucks when you have your period of responsibility and you have to tell the kids no and do your homework and no, you can't go to that party and no, you can't go to do this, and it's hard to always be the person that has to say no,
Yep.
right? Or to always be the person that has to do all the heavy lifting, right? So I think that I don't know. I think that people just need to grow up and see that, the currency that you're spending is your children's emotional well-being, right? I
That's
mean,
it.
and to have your kids, but we live in this kind of narcissist fueled society where everybody's out for themselves. And I mean, if I had a nickel for every time somebody called somebody else in a divorce case a narcissist, I'd have a lot of freaking nickels and I wouldn't need to practice law anymore, right? Like I would have so many nickels, right? And it's like, and I don't think that really there are really as many personality disorders, true narcissists.
No.
I think alcoholism and drug addiction, like those people are extremely narcissistic, but if they find recovery, the selfishness and self-centeredness is mediated, right? And
Right.
they're given some spiritual tools and a program to kind of follow so that they're not just selfish jerks anymore. But the true personality disordered people are really driving kind of what's happening. And the people that do not have severe personality disorders are settling their matters out of court. Right now, like my opinion is that every case that's litigated in court, there's a personality disorder on one or both sides because
Yeah.
you just can't negotiate with them. And
Yeah.
there's no reason. What they feel, what they think, what they want is the only thing that matters. Only thing that matters.
Yep.
They don't care. They're not capable of stepping outside themselves and going, what's the bigger picture here? Like in your example, that woman is not capable of going, okay, so I'm injured, I'm wounded, I'm hurt. That's my pain, right? So my responsibility as a mother and a human being is to go over here and figure out and handle my stuff, right?
Right.
To not cause my children to be the price that's paid, right? Yeah, I'm really mad at him, right? But that is a personal problem, right? That is not a custody problem,
Right.
right? If he's a good dad, he's not,
That's your problem with the other
born
parent.
24/7. He's not, bringing hookers to the house. He's not doing meth on the dining room table. Like he goes to work, he parents his kids, maybe he does it a little differently than you do. Like why is that an issue? That's not a custody issue. That's a personal problem,
Yeah.
right? To believe that that's how you should handle it. And the same is true, like just because I got such a bad rap for like dissing on women, like the same thing is true of men, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Sure it is.
you know, women, if you're hurt by your spouse's exit of the marriage, that is incumbent upon you to deal with that, right?
Right.
Independent as an adult, like bright
Yep.
wide line between personal life and parenting life, right? In my opinion, right? And as an adult, mature adult, like it's your job to figure out your stuff and not make your kids pay for it, right? Because you're unwilling to deal with, your ego being bruised or, and I don't mean to make it seem like, when your spouse comes and blindsides you and says, we're done, I want a divorce, no conversation, no therapy, we're finished, that is a hard thing to do. I'm not trying to say that like, oh, it's easy, you should just deal with your stuff and it's so easy. It's not, right? But like, I think it brings an opportunity for you to go, okay, what was my part? What did I do to
Right.
contribute to this?
Right.
Because everybody has a part. I've been doing this
Oh,
28 years.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Even if your part was 1%, and that's the best news ever. Because if you're completely the victim of another person and you had no responsibility for the demise of your marriage whatsoever, you're screwed. Because you can't do anything about that other person. If it's 100% the other person's fault, what are you going to do differently? Nothing. Because you were perfect.
Right.
Nobody was
Right.
perfect. And I'll tell you from my own experience, like the further I get out from my marriage, the more I realize how much of it was my fault.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know? So, I don't know.
Absolutely. How you could have handled something different, whatever it might have been. Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. You kind of touched on it, but custody used to manipulate child support, whether that's to receive more or pay less.
Both sides do it. It's ugly. It's
Yeah.
stupid. You know? I mean, you know, the truth of the matter is that child support doesn't begin to support the child. You know what I mean?
Right.
What I'll just use my own example. I mean, my ex-husband has paid his child support religiously without fail. We've always negotiated when there's needed to be a deviation if we needed to go up or whatever. And I will tell you that what he pays me doesn't begin to cover even a quarter of what it cost me to raise these kids all by myself.
Right.
Right? Even when he was paying half of the nanny, even when all of the things like it didn't even cover half of my housing expenses, right? So it's like, it's not, most of the time, it's not even fair when you've got like a more sole custody situation. Like, it's not even fair, you know?
But
You're doing all,
that's also you, Aaron. I mean, don't you think there's cases when, and you probably negotiated that, so, but and you probably were very fair, just kind of knowing you. But don't you think there's several cases out there? I mean, I've heard it from lots of people where they'll say, you know, they're paying them $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month for two kids, three kids, and you know, and they're complaining, they're wanting more. I mean, $20,000 a month for three kids, yeah, you should be able to.
yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, when you get above like the regular custody guidelines and you get into the high income earners and everything else, it kind of becomes. I think that those kind of cases are kind of throwaway. If you're able to pay $20,000 a month in support, like you're not really worried about the support. Like you're living your life probably just fine. I think where people get squeezed badly is when you're right, lower income and lower middle income is where you
Yeah.
get squeezed because the guidelines, here, if you make this much money, the state says this is how much money you've got to pay. And if you are in a situation where it's a more traditional kind of custody thing where you're a dad and you're getting every other weekend and a midweek visit on the off week, like then, yeah. I mean, it becomes. I was talking to somebody the other day. I mean, a guy that I know, and he makes $3,200 a month after taxes, and his child support is 2,000. He's like, how am I supposed to live on $1,200 a month in California?
Oh,
He can't, and he doesn't get to see his kids. Why doesn't he get to see his kids? Because guess what? He can't afford housing, so he's living in kind of a less than stellar situation. So mom won't let the kids go. Which, like, I get it. I mean, I understand why she says that, but it's like he just can't get out from under it, right? And there's just kind of no relief. I mean, he doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer. He doesn't have the money to go to court. He can't negotiate with her because she's holding all the cards and she's like, you know what? You cheated on me and I hate you and I'm gonna, like, we're not dealing. I'm just not dealing with you, you know? Um, and so, it just has become this situation that started off badly, right? But the price that he's being asked to pay for the alleged crime that was committed is just, it's not fair. It's not right, right? It's like, those kids are suffering because they're not getting a full good relationship with their parents, right?
right.
So it's I don't know what the solution is. I wish that I could sit here and be like, okay, what we need to do is I think it's incumbent upon every person that finds themselves in a divorce situation to get the information and the shoring up that they need to not allow their kind of reactive emotional responses to dictate what happens to their children. right? Like it's kind of like if you have a drinking problem, it's kind of your responsibility to deal with it, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe you have a drinking problem because of childhood trauma. Maybe you have a drinking problem, whatever. Like, but you cross the magical line, and now you're an alcoholic or an addict or whatever. Like, it's your problem. So it becomes your problem to fix. And I think when you find yourself in a divorce, it becomes your problem to solve. And you have to be able to kind of take an honest look at the stuff that you're bringing to the table and the stuff that you're not bringing to the table. And if you know emotionally, I'm completely destroyed, like, and I want to retaliate, to be able to recognize in some level that that's not normal. Like, that's not, and that who's going to suffer? Everyone. And you're participating in the suffering. Maybe you've got somebody on the other side that's hell bent on making you miserable. Okay. That doesn't mean that you have to respond in kind, right? And in fact, in my experience, the times that work most effectively in those high conflict situations is where you remove the reactivity. Stop. It doesn't have to be
Go
point
ahead.
counterpoint.
Do you think 50-50 is the best place to start? I
Yeah,
know
I do.
yeah, I do
In
too.
most situations. I mean, taking into consideration crazy, insane work schedules, taking into consideration addiction of all kinds, and personality disorders, right? I think honestly, whoever is the parent that's going to most foster a good continual relationship with the other parent should have the most custody. If both
Yeah.
parents are willing to work there, it should be 50-50. But if you've got one person who's divisive and undermining and, oh no, you can't have them on Tuesday because of this, and they schedule all the play dates and birthday parties during the other parent's time and stuff like that, then I think the other parent should have more custody because they're more willing to foster it's gonna, and that's what the court should be doing. But sometimes the attorneys do a really bad job of presenting that. Sometimes it languishes. We have the status quo problem that we spoke about earlier. I think it just ends up being a very difficult situation. But
Well, I am in a little bit. I am going to get into it about the attorneys being behind this of driving some of this conflict. I do want to ask your opinion on that. But one thing that, gosh, it came up way too much, Erin, was, and I wanted to ask you how often you see this, was a spouse using a protective order to gain the upper hand when false allegations. And it
most
just,
effective strategy
I
there is.
cannot tell you, Erin, how many times I heard this from different guys and, domestic violence, just different things. And then it was proven not true. I mean, I even had a guest on here, Paul Summers, who is an author of a book that just came out, and he experienced it as well. But I promise you, I probably received 20 to 30 just DMs, and that's not
Mhm.
even what's in the comments.
Right. No, I mean, I don't want to make it seem like it's bigger than what it is, but everybody knows that the most effective way to get immediate control is to file a temporary restraining order. And the problem is that once you file a temporary restraining order, the probable cause is so low. Like,
Hmm.
all I have to say, if like Robert pushed me,
Hmm.
I'm going to get it. I'm afraid of him and he pushed me. I'm going to
Yeah,
get it,
I'm afraid of
right?
them. Yeah,
And honestly, if you make it there first, you're going to get it. Erin pushed me and I'm afraid of her. She's crazy. Like, you're going to get it. So it's kind of like whoever makes it to the courthouse first is going to get the order. Now, supposedly they're supposed to tie it. This just happened in one of my cases, where there was an issue with the custody exchange. Dad, with no notice, went down to the court and got a temporary order giving him complete custody of the kid, even though the kid wasn't, other than being present at this alleged thing, it wasn't even a thing. So then we had all of that to deal with, right? So mom had been the primary custodian. She was trying to give dad more custody. And anyway, that case has a whole other, there was a restraining order, a valid restraining order against dad from mom, from him like slapping her and things like that, which had expired. But anyway, it's one of these situations where it is the most effective tool to get control of the case. And in some cases, I will say it is utilized well. There have been cases that I have had that I've been involved in where there were grounds. We're not making them up. These are not lies. They were
Right.
factual grounds for the restraining order. We got it. We got the temporary, and then we were able to negotiate some interim agreement based on that, because so much is at stake if you go through with the actual protective order hearing, right? Like, you're not going to be able to have guns, you're going to be on a national registry, there's lots of things, like you have a government job, security clearances, all that kind of stuff come into play if the actual protective order gets entered against you, right? The Klutz orders. So, but sometimes they are super effective in getting an interim agreement, whereas if you didn't have that, the parties are just, one person's taking the kid and then the other person's taking it just is crazy town, right? And then you end up in an emergency motions, and who knows what the court considers emergencies. Some judges on the bench are like, if the kid's not bleeding or dying, don't come to me, right? Now, meanwhile, the kid is being jerked back and forth and the police are being called every single day, which is definitely not good for the kid. So yeah, does it happen? Yes. Do people make stuff up? Yes. Do I spend a lot of time in almost every initial consultation that I see any like tiny tinge of their, like, even if the parties are just living in the same house, they're getting along, there's never been any allegations, they seem to have a decent marriage, it's just over. I always counsel like, hey, look, you got to be really careful.
Yeah.
I would not be alone. I had a
Yeah.
client recently who, there was no indication that the wife was gonna do any of those things. But he had a police officer friend that lived across the hall, and when he told her, like, I need you to leave, you cheated, I found out, like, I want you to go. He had his police officer buddy just over having a beer, like hanging out, just to keep the peace. And I said, don't be alone with her. Don't have phone calls with her, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know. And the only way that you can, and the thing is that anybody can say whatever they want. Anybody can say whatever they want. Like, I can completely make stuff up. And if I go down to the court, 9 times out of 10 on a temporary order, they're going to grant it because the judge doesn't know. What if
Right.
it's true? Right? And then the
Yeah.
judge doesn't want to be in the headlines of, some major newspaper. Judge denies protective order, woman dead, man dead, like children dead. Like, they don't want that.
But I think the
Which,
problem too, though, when there are these false allegations, and look, let's go back. Are they a necessary tool at times? Yeah, absolutely. But and I think it's very powerful and very much needed at times. But it's when there are these false allegations, and then do you see very rarely and I'm just going on people that have written in and people I've talked to. I have maybe 5% of the time have I ever heard that there's any blowback on the person that made those false allegations.
no, there isn't. There's almost no accountability. There's a case I was involved in down in LA a long time ago, and husband and wife got into a scuffle, and she ran down and got a protective order on her own, restraining order, a temporary, and then she went and hired one of the biggest, baddest, divorce firms in LA, and I don't know whether they just didn't read her petition for the original protective order, but then they augmented it, and it didn't match up. The facts did not match up. He threw me to the bed and onto the floor, and in her petition, it was like, we struggled over the phone. Like, they were
Wow.
completely divergent. And so when the attorneys went down and were litigating that matter, the judge called the attorneys up to the bench, and they looked at the wife's counsel and said, you going to put your client on the stand? And he's like, of course. And he's like, what are you going to do about her credibility problem that she's got here? And they're like, what do you mean? And she's like, have you read all the pleadings in this matter? And they're like, well, yeah. And they're like, I'd read them again if I were you. And they went back and read them, and then they dropped it, right? Because they knew they were going to lose, right? And it was all posturing, right? And that case was the attorneys. Like, they took what wife had done probably badly to begin with and not very ethically, but then they augmented it like
Right.
big time to make it way bigger than it was, and they got
The
caught.
attorneys did.
The attorneys did, yeah.
Yeah.
And it went away, but our client spent an evening in the jail. Our client didn't get to see his kids for Christmas. Our client, and it was a horrible. It was a horrible case. They're still together, by the way. They reconciled. But anyway, that's another story. Um, And I issue no judgment on that. Like you got to, you got to do whatever you think is best at the end of the day. Everybody's got their reasons, but yeah.
I had heard about this, about the false allegations prior to us speaking and prior to different ones reaching out, but not that frequently. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole and started
Okay.
doing internet research. And so part of my research, of course, I went to Instagram and YouTube and even Reddit, and it's like tips for guys that are thinking about getting a divorce. A lot of that had to do with finances and, protecting, but it wasn't as, and again, this is just me reading it and what I saw, it wasn't as vengeful. And then I went I went from a female's point of view, looking at divorce tips for divorcing my husband. And that was crazy. Now, maybe maybe people looking out for guys or that are wanting to help guys don't have the presence, but these allegations of domestic violence, that was common, very common, especially on Reddit when you had different people. Well, my attorney told me that, told me I could file a domestic violence order. It was crazy, and so much of it was on getting the money, and how best to get the money. And if you can prove this, if you can get that, and all you need to do is get the custody, and then you'll get more money, you'll get alimony. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's sick.
Okay. So here's the thing. To me, there are two types of domestic violence, right? There is the systemic burning bed, abuse, right? Where the person is isolated, controlled, sexually dominated, financially dominated. Every movement that they do is controlled. How much they
Right.
eat, what they wear, where they go, who they're friends with, all of that kind of stuff. That is like the systemic domestic violence, right? There is use any means necessary to completely control and dominate this other person, right? So like there's that, right? There's way too many of them.
Right.
However, those cases are actually the hardest. Like when you really have that kind of domestic abuse, it is actually really hard to prove in court oftentimes, unless there are broken bones, unless there are emergency room visits, unless the police have been called. And oftentimes the police are called multiple times, and the woman will say, no, he didn't hit me.
Yeah.
I walked into the door, and that's why the police departments in many jurisdictions it's a must arrest. Like if
Right.
there's a mark, you got to arrest. If you see a bruise on the woman's face, you got to arrest the guy. Sorry. Sometimes women beat themselves up.
Yeah.
We had a case one time where the woman stabbed herself. Stabbed herself. And luckily
Oh
the
my
guy could
God.
afford really good counsel, and they were able to prove that it was self-inflicted, and he didn't go to jail, and he didn't lose custody of the kids. He got custody of the kids. I mean, the level of crazy that goes on. But I think that, I think it's interesting that the women, like from what everybody has said and what my research has shown, that women do file more frequently than men do.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why there's so much more information out there. But then there's the other type of domestic violence, which I think is situational, right? You have two people who are not getting along. Things get heated. Usually alcohol is involved. Somebody says something, somebody throws something, and today in our society, it goes back. It's like this across the board. When we were growing up, two kids would get in a fight after school, usually boys, right? And what would happen? The parents would get called. You'd have to go over and apologize, whatever. Maybe if there was really damage done, the other family would say, well, we'll pay the medical bills and whatever. And it was
Yeah.
handled, right? There were no restraining orders. The police weren't involved. Nobody was filing civil actions in court or anything like that, right? But today, that's not the way it is. And today, I've had clients I'm like, well, did you shove him? And they're like, well, yeah, but he's like 6'4" and I'm 5'2". And I'm like, it doesn't matter. You can't put your hands on the other person. Like, period. You can't throw phones at them. Like, that is domestic violence. And so what's happened is that you have people that are inebriated, emotionally compromised, have a personality disorder, are not very mature, whatever, are emotionally distraught, and they react and they do something stupid. And it's like, it just takes one act,
But I have heard from several that it's a lot harder for men to get a restraining order on a female, that the judges tend not to believe the men
I
as
don't know that
often.
that, I think that really is jurisdictionally dependent, right? I
Probably
think it
so.
also depends on what kind of lawyer you've got, right? Or
Oh,
whether
yeah.
you don't have one. And it depends on the circumstances. But like, I mean, I just had this a couple weeks ago. We are in the middle of negotiating this whole custody case, and there was this custody exchange problem, and he went down and got a restraining order giving him 100% custody. Like he got it. Now, I think that part of the difference is that I think that men and women are pretty equal in getting the temporary because
Mm.
the threshold for proof is so low, and the judge is like, I don't know if this guy's really telling me the truth. I need to enter this order and keep the peace until I can figure out what's going on. I think once you get to the place where you actually have to put on actual proof, maybe that's where things kind of fall apart,
Could be.
right? You
And
know,
it could be in a guy's presentation too, right? But it was interesting hearing these comments. So
I think absolutely. Do women abuse the process? Yes. Do men get screwed because of that? Yes, absolutely happens. Far too often. Far too often. And I'm a huge proponent against it because, like, for every woman that abuses the process and uses the domestic violence restraining order improperly to gain advantage in the custody case, you hurt every woman that is actually being abused.
sure.
You completely water down the process so that the women that absolutely, or the men, I did worked at a domestic violence shelter when I was in law school, and I started a hotel program, and the hotel program was like so that local hotels would, when the shelter was full, or like in that town, if you had a son that was 13 years old or older, you couldn't go to the shelter. Like you couldn't take a boy to the shelter. So if you had a
Wow.
teenage boy, you had to stay in this abusive relationship. So we started a hotel program where like whenever we'd have somebody that for whatever reason wouldn't fit in. And one of the first calls I got was from a gay man that was being horribly abused by his lover, right? And there was no shelter for him. There wasn't a men's shelter for domestic violence. There was only a women's
Right.
shelter. And he was a grown man. And so we started this hotel program. So like anybody can abuse the system, right? Anybody can abuse the system, and everybody's hurt by the system. And the people that desperately need the protection, men and women, are not protected.
Right.
And that's
Right.
wrong.
And and who gets hurt the most? The children. I mean, that's the thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing. Hey, all right, let's jump to some of the comments.
Okay. I want everybody to know like my Botox is not bad because I didn't get it. So like I don't have any bad Botox that you guys can comment on. You're gonna have to find some other flaw of mine to comment on and call me out on, which
Aaron, you can say that, but I had so many comments and messages. Who is she? She's hot. Oh, we need to protect this woman at all costs. Who is this? Oh gosh, it was. I should have gone through and written them down. Who is this wise and fine lady and all this stuff?
oh,
It's like,
thank
oh
you.
my gosh, it's so funny. So,
I didn't get so many of those. I got,
oh,
hey, you need to talk to your Botox person because you've got a line at the top of your forehead and whatever. So
I had plenty, and it was I had to tell him sometimes to settle down because I didn't want this going too far. You know, I wanted them to stick on the subject.
pay attention to the subject matter. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
but two of them started up. The number one thing that harms children in a divorce the most, and but the main one was women versus men in divorce. And you basically said, tell me if I'm wrong, you basically said that men come in and they're like, you know what, we want 50-50, here's hers, I want to provide for her, and that's that. Where women come in there and, they want to retaliate. They are more vengeful. Is that a pretty fair assessment? And that's
That's
your
my
experience,
experience.
right? You're
That's
not,
my experience. I'm not saying that all women are retaliatory and vengeful and
or
all
that
men
all
are
men want to give up 50-50 either.
right. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that in my experience, usually when I get a call from a guy, it's like, look, I just want to be fair. I had a call with a guy the other day and he's like, I said, well, it looks like that, you'd be entitled to X, Y, or Z. And he's like, I don't need X or Y. I mean, if I just get Z, it's fine. And I said, I'm like, how old are you? And he's like, 65. And I'm like, okay, so this is like a huge, important financial transaction. You can't really afford to just roll over and give her everything at this point in time. Like, what are you going to do with your life? Right. And I think that, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I know I got called out a lot and I hate women and I'm a misogynist and all this kind of stuff. I'm just talking to you about I have a lot of women that are like super fair that come in and are like, look, he's a good dad. I don't like him very much, but I want him out of my life. But he's a good dad. He should. I have lots of women that say that too. I'm saying that generally speaking, in a gross generalization, that when you bleed it down the gender lines, men come in and have a tendency to go, what can we do that's fair? What can we do that's fair? I want to see my kids. I don't want this to go on forever. I don't want to litigate with her. I don't want to, whatever. And then on the other side of things, women are like, well, I don't want him to have custody. I don't want him to have this. I don't want him to have that. He cheated. I'm going to make him pay. It goes both ways. But generally speaking, and everybody was kind of, and I started thinking about why would that be? Women have been disenfranchised for a really long time. Maybe they're just pissed. Maybe this is just a blowback. Maybe they'll come back more to the center after, a period of time. But maybe we've had to fight harder to get our needs heard or our whatever. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm just saying in my experience, if there's going to be a person that is super retaliatory in a divorce, it is usually on the female side of things.
Yeah. You're saying the majority of the time. Majority of the time can be 60%. It doesn't mean that 99% of the time.
It's still the majority, right?
And also it's your experience. It doesn't mean it's everybody else's.
It doesn't mean it's everybody's experience. I mean, but I think that I deal with men and women equally. So I feel like I have a pretty good sampling across the board. I'd say over the time I've represented and worked with just as many women as I have men, it's just my experience, right? So
what were some of the feelings when I doubt you read all the comments that came up, but we've talked a few times since, and some of the feelings I saw were, and we've talked about it already, but this vengeance, this anger, this hatred, this hurt.
Well, women did a really good job of proving my point in the comments. I mean, there was a lot of retaliatory nastiness. The thing, I guess the overreaching thing for me that was most difficult about the whole deal was that men have some very valid points about shit that women do that is wrong, bad, and damaging, right? And women have some very valid points about stuff that men do that is wrong, bad, and damaging, right? And the fact of the matter is that in most of the comments that I saw, nobody listened to the other side. Nope. Women weren't listening to what the men were saying. They were just rejecting it, name calling, and so were the men. You're a gold digging bitch. You're a misogynistic asshole. Like, okay, great. Okay, so now we still have the same problem, but now we have a lot of hurt feelings that go along with it. What progress did we make? None progress.
There's so many people out there now that are like, I'm never going to get married again. I never want another woman again, or I can live without a man. I don't need men in my life. And I'm like, wow, there's going to be a lot of single people out there now, and that will continue to be. It's sad, really.
And it's missing the point.
It is.
The point is and this, I'm going to say this is the absolute, I believe this with every fiber of my being. The reason that people get divorced is because the lies we tell ourselves, either about ourselves or about the person that we're marrying, right? We get caught up in the societal pressures. We get caught up with wanting to start a family. We get caught up with, infatuation, and we fail to heed the red flags that are there. I had a client that I actually got from our podcast, and he was telling me his, divorce story. And I stopped him like 10 minutes in and said, of course you're getting a divorce. Here's the 3 red flags that I saw before you ever knew that things were wrong. And I went boom, boom, boom. And he's like, oh my God, you're totally right. And I go, this woman was giving you strong indications. I mean, one of the things was like, she didn't want him to tell anybody that they were engaged. What? Like, that's supposed to be a joyous occasion. It's not something you keep on the down low, right? Like, I'm like, and then I asked him, why did you agree to that? Why did you agree to marry a woman who didn't want to anybody else to know that you were getting married? What is that about, right? So it was a lie he told himself. This is going to be different. This is, we excuse away the behavior of both ourselves or whatever. We marry somebody that maybe is ideally what we want, but isn't actually what we want, right? So it's a setup from the very beginning. Like, I think it requires a level of
And people change.
And people do change. Absolutely.
People change. And you have to conform. You have to change. Yeah, everybody changes.
Everybody changes, but it's the lies that we tell ourselves about who we're marrying and who we're engaged with and who and what we're capable of, right? I think
Yeah.
that nobody really looks at their capacity or their spouse's capacity, right? At the very beginning. And if I think people started doing that, you wouldn't have men saying, "I'm never getting married. They're all gold digging whore, terrible people, like." And women wouldn't be saying they're all assholes that are completely, cheating jerks, like lying, cheating jerks. Like I think that that person was more than likely giving you strong indications of who they were when you were dating them, and you went
Right.
ahead and married them anyway, right? So that's on you, not on the other person, right? Like, I can't tell you how many men and women that I have said this to. Okay, yeah, but that's who they are.
Right.
They've always been. I had one woman that's like, he's always, he's underemployed and hasn't been employed. And I'm like, but he's been underemployed or getting fired the entirety of your relationship.
Right.
Like, how are you holding him accountable to this now? He was doing that before you got married. The fact
Right.
that he continued to do it through the marriage, you were on notice.
Yeah.
It's not like he
Yeah.
was like, I'm
You're
working at a
aware.
Fortune 500 company and I'm bringing in $16 million a year, and now he marries you and now he's unemployable. That's not the situation, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's always been erratic and unemployable, right? And now you're mad about it. Well, whose fault is that? He told you who he was. You didn't believe him. Whose fault is that? Not his. He's just
That's a
being
good
the
point.
same person he's always been.
So a lot of the comments too were around the process, the
Mm.
divorce process, the custody process. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm gonna give you mine first. You
Okay.
might not like it.
Okay.
Um, I think the whole system has a lot to do with this. I think from the judges, the even the attorneys. I think at times you would know better than me. And a lot of them said this. They felt that the attorney was milking the client, let's say, and
Hmm.
trying to get more out of it and trying to stir the flames up to prolong it and in turn made it worse. But who's getting paid? The attorneys.
Oh,
Agree,
yeah.
disagree?
I think there are definitely attorneys out there that do that.
Yeah. And I am not saying every family law attorney. I know
No.
there's some really good ones out there.
No, I think I think it's a confluence of events. I think there are clients that come in that take very hard positions and back the attorney into a corner where the only legal remedies that they've got is to go to court, and the attorney's like back behind the scenes going, "You don't want to do this, you don't want to do this," but to achieve the client's objectives, that's all the attorney's got. He's only got like this is the only path, right?
Right.
There are definitely those people that are known to just stir stuff up, and that's why you hired them because you want to create a shit show dumpster fire. But I don't, in my experience in dealing with opposing counsels and everything else, most of us, litigation is hard. It's hard on the parties. It's hard on the judges. It's hard on us as attorneys. Like, it is difficult, right? You managing a client's emotional and financial realities while you're going through the litigation process is not fun. It's not
Right.
fun at all. Right? It costs way more. You're constantly explaining yourself. Your client comes back on you. You get a good settlement on an interim issue, and then later on they're mad at you because of some other part of it. Like, it's just an ugly process. So I think that, yes, there are those people that fan the flames. But, if you guys want to stop it, stop hiring those attorneys.
Yeah.
Stop hiring them. They'll go find some other area of law to practice. But if as long as they're still getting business, we're still going to have that problem, right? So go for the people that, right now in my practice, I really, unless it's already in court, I am steering everybody to, hey, let's not file anything. Let's just look at things. And a lot of that's driven by the way Maryland processes
Right.
divorce, right? In California, it was like kind of completely different because you can file in California and then the court, unless you do something, the court's not really going to do anything until you push them to do something, unless you just let it sit there for too long. But in Maryland, like, as soon as you file, the process is going and the court now takes control of it, and they're setting deadlines and they're sending merits hearing dates and all of that. So like in Maryland, it seems like it's in everybody's best interest to kind of go, hold on, let's not get the court involved yet. Let's give this a good faith attempt to try to work it out, right? Either through counsel, through mediation, through some process, and like, let's see if we can't get this, and then we can file an uncontested divorce. Let's get the deal done, and then we can file the uncontested divorce. Simple 10-minute divorce hearing. You've just saved a ton of money, right? But some of those cases are not in that posture.
Would you agree, though, that some of the inefficiencies of the court system and the court, when I say from the judge all the way to the attorneys, is part of the you know, probably has a big hand in a lot of this,
Oh,
a lot of these
absolutely.
negative emotions.
It's it's so hard to get people to understand that, the process, like we have laid this family system
Mhm.
over this artificial adversarial process,
Right.
right? And there are all these technical things. And in family law, I mean, I get very frustrated because like I'm a very rule driven person. And so like if you didn't give me your discovery on the date, like you're done. You should not be able to introduce any evidence. Like it should be a hard and fast rule. But the court's like, well, they're pro se and maybe, and no, like the system would work so much better if there were really severe consequences for not doing it. However, losing your kids forever because you didn't, because you got your stuff in on the second day instead of the third day, like, or the third day instead of the second day, seems like unfair, which is why the court
Right.
does it. But it just becomes the process. There are so many places for people who don't like each other and can't get along to abuse each other,
Yeah.
right? And the court system doesn't move swiftly. There's not like there's just have a, like in California they do private judging, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, you
I
have
do
to have the
too.
resources to do that. But like the judge, you have a disagreement. Hey, we need 15 minutes of your time on Friday. Okay, great. The judge makes a decision and you're
Yeah.
done. You don't
Yeah.
have, $30,000 worth of paperwork filed with the court and court appearances and witnesses and all that kind of stuff. It's just the process sucks, but it's
So, do you think technology, advancements in technology and AI specifically will alleviate some of that
no, I
and
think it's going to
improve
make
it?
it worse.
You don't?
I think it's going to make it worse because think of it this way. Right now, if I want to, like, let's say I want to file a motion to modify custody, right? I got to get in there. I got to talk with the client. I got to find out all the facts. I got to get all my exhibits together. I got to do all this stuff. It's a lengthy process. It's going to take me a week or two to get all that stuff together, right? With AI, like I can just throw in some basic facts and I can generate out, boom, in super quick order, emotion, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
something that used to take me 2 weeks to necessarily get done and give opportunity for things to maybe get resolved, now I can spit it out super quickly, right? So now I can rapid fire the other side. Boom, 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 right?
Yep.
I don't know. I think that's going to be abused and I think it's going to make it worse, not better. Um, the more ability we have to churn out paperwork faster, right, without the ability to, and for it's reactionary, right? And I can't tell you how many times in the time that I've been drafting something and getting it together and getting all the exhibits together and everything else, it goes away, or it gets resolved or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Gets worked out. Yeah.
but if the person calls me on Monday at 2 and they say I want to file this, and because of AI I can have everything ready by Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., we've got one day to solve something. And if I'm busy doing all of
Wow.
that, when do I have the time to try to negotiate a settlement, right? I believe that it's incumbent upon every family law attorney to make a good faith effort at every stage to try to resolve it, right? Hey, can we do this? Can we do this? And sometimes, the times where I tell clients, like, we got to go to court is when they're just, if you spend too long over in negotiating land, they just bleed your client out a different way. The other side's just playing around. It's like you do an agreement and they send it over and they send back changes and then you send it over and then they change it again. And then you've gone, that's been going on for a month. So I'm finally like, okay, we're not getting anywhere. Let's not do this anymore. Let's just file. Like, let's just go to court. And then usually the threat of court makes people say, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I was being unreasonable. All right. They're not going to admit that to you, but,
Right.
and you get a settlement, right? Sometimes the threat of litigation is what you have to have in order to move it forward. Or the actual litigation, well, we're going to go if you're not going to be reasonable. And then people usually are reasonable because once they start getting lawyer litigation bills, they're like, oh my God, no, because it's true. The only people that benefit from litigation is the attorneys. It's just a
That
fact.
is so true. That is
It
so
really
true.
is. And I don't ever pull any punches about that. I mean, our best case scenario is to litigate every single case that walks through our doors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. Now, I would not want to ever do that personally because the toll that it would take on me personally is exorbitant. It's unethical, right? The toll that it takes on the client and the financial wherewithal that most clients have to litigate a case is not there. Nobody has like a divorce war chest. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
regardless of whether
Especially
you're
now.
making 7 figures a year or 5 figures a year. Like most people are living paycheck to paycheck because we all live way beyond our means, right?
I think a lot of it, you said it earlier, goes back to this emotional immaturity.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of it that drives this. What else, before we wrap up, what else in the comments that you want to bring up? Anything else that you saw that kind of underlying?
I guess, we're both the problem.
Yeah.
The men and the women are the problem. And that's the best news ever because then we're both the solution, right? So, like, you know, stop using the inflammatory language, stop using the swear words, stop calling each other out and name calling and everything, and get to what's underneath it. The truth of the matter is, we're all afraid. Women are afraid, men are afraid, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to pay dearly with the things that are most important to us: our security, our children, our ability to function in daily life. Like, that's what we're all afraid of, right? So, like, let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation about that instead of men are dogs and women are gold diggers and like all this stuff. Like, we're missing the point. Right? How do we, like, to me, somebody said this to me and it like revolutionized the way I think about everything. They said, when you love somebody, you make them feel safe. You make your behavior safe for them, right? And I will tell you that in divorce, nobody's making anybody feel safe. And the marriage is crumbling because nobody made anybody feel safe. It wasn't even a goal, right? It wasn't a goal to make anybody feel safe. So, like, if you want things to change, become a safe person, right? Do what you say you're going to do, right? Have your actions and your words match, right? Endeavor to make the other person not feel financially insecure. Women do that to men all the time. They're like, well, I'm going to get you and take you for everything you're worth. And then men go, I'm going to take your kids away from you. And then both sides are completely freaking out, right? Stop it. I swear to God, in all of the time, like, I have never seen anybody get a better divorce settlement through intimidation. Sometimes it works, but it not generally speaking, it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't make things better for people. It makes things worse. Scared people do stupid things, right?
Yep.
So, like, let's talk about the fear that everybody's got that's driving all of this. People are like, I'm never going to get married now. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. Like, really? That's your solution? To just opt out of the game completely? I'm not going to love. I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to do
I'm not going to
anything.
love. I'm not going to be loved. I mean, that's sad.
I'm not going to reproduce.
Yeah.
Like, those are some of the finest things in life that we have to experience. Loving, being loved, being cared for. Like, I think we're missing the point. The point is that the whole reason that we committed to begin with, because we loved this person and we wanted to build a life with this person. And somewhere along the way, it went horribly awry. And we are all at fault.
Yeah. What do they say, that divorce is the end of a dream?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, it doesn't, but it doesn't mean not to have another dream.
Right. No, and look, I think that using the yardstick of longevity to say that that's a successful marriage, I think is the wrong yardstick. I think that my marriage was a very successful marriage. It did not have staying power to go on for the rest of my life, but I don't think that my relationship with my ex-husband was a failure. I mean, yeah, it ended, right? It had an expiration date. It ended, but it doesn't mean that it was a horrible relationship. I grew, I changed, I learned some things about him, about myself, about commitment, about how I do it, how I don't do it well. I learned some things about him, but generally speaking, I know lots of people that have been married for 40 years and are super unhappy, right?
Oh yeah.
I think that we're using the wrong yardstick to, it should be about, what is being given, what is being taken, what is being offered, and I really do think that this whole idea of safety, right, is super important. And I think you can use it to your advantage. I mean, everybody's out there for themselves, so they want to gain their advantage. If you really want to gain an advantage in a divorce, make the other side feel safe.
There you go.
Make the other side feel safe.
Erin, you're wonderful.
Oh,
and I
thank
so
you.
much appreciate you being on. No, I so much appreciate you being on. All right. How can people find you? Do not give your cell number, because I don't want you getting calls and texts and pics and everything else at all hours of the night. But how can people find you?
You can go to my Instagram or any social media, which is Erin E. Schaden, at Erin E. Schaden. Let's see, I've got my website, which is Erin Schaden. Yeah, that's, you can also find me at my law firm, which is Fate and DeLima out of Rockville, Maryland. Although we're revising our website, so we're in a branding changeover. So I don't think I'm on the website right now, but you can still get a hold of me there if you need to. So.
And that is with whether it's family law matters, divorce coaching, whatever.
DC area, anything related to family law. So it's fdfamilylaw.com.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Erin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Really.
Robert. It's always a pleasure. Thank
Seriously,
you
thank you
for
for coming on.
braving.
And I enjoyed it. I appreciate it. And maybe you'll go viral again. I mean, you made me
Well,
where I had to look up what is viral. What
I
does
know.
viral mean? I had no
I know.
idea.
I didn't either. Well, what's really funny is that one of the things that somebody said, which is actually the thing that hurt the most, out of all the comments that I read that were kind of hurtful, was that I didn't turn off the comments because I just wanted to create more controversy. And I was like, you can turn off the comments? I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that I had that power. I didn't even know. So it's like, oh, you're such a bad person because you're just feeding the controversy. I'm like, I didn't even know you can turn off the comments. Geez, sorry.
It's so
I'm not
funny.
as internet savvy as I might appear.
Well, I'm not. I mean, I've already shared that with you. You know, I'm not. So, but Erin,
And yet
thank you.
here we are. And here
Yeah,
we are
here we
doing
are. So, Erin,
trying
thank you
to
again. And look, hey,
all right.
thank you all for listening to Dad's podcast. You can find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube or Instagram. And do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And we'll see you all next time.